viewers, and welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide. I am your host, Chef Andy, and today we are going to be going Mediterranean quite a bit. We're going to be making a very simple Mediterranean egg bake strata. And before I get to that point, I'll proceed to introduce the ingredients just to give you an idea of what to expect for this very show. So from the very front, I've got some mushrooms that have been chopped. I've also got a cleaned and washed red onion with about 3 cloves of garlic to go with. You're also going to require some marjoram, about a teaspoon, a tablespoon of some sun-dried tomatoes, and some pitted black olives mixed together. You'll also require a teaspoon of some chili flakes and a teaspoon of some paprika powder, a small handful of some flat leaf parsley. You'll also require about 3 tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese and about 300 grams of some mozzarella cheese, about 3 slices of some cooked ham, and 3 medium-sized eggs. Of course, you will require some seasoning, which will come from your salt and black peppercorns, some olive oil to cook with for this recipe, and you'll also require 1 cup of milk. But of course, you will of course tally that out as you proceed. But to finish that off, you will also require about 3 slices of white toast, which we're basically going to be incorporating to this very simple dish. But before we forget to mention, you'll also require to have a bit of some aluminium foil, and of course some oven-proof ramekin dishes. Doesn't matter the size, but just be sure to make sure that these are particularly safe to use in the oven. Also, to add to that, you'll require some bowls of which you're going to be mixing up most of your ingredients with, and of course you will also have to have a preheated oven where you're going to be baking this very, very simple dish. But before we get there, we're going to begin by allowing you this chance to freshen up and grab a pen and paper if you're taking notes, and we'll catch you after a very short break. Welcome back, viewers. If you're just catching up with the show, we've right about already begun by introducing the ingredients, but I will take you through the first process of the preparation, which is preparing and cooking some of your ingredients. So begin by adding some oil to a pan. And next up, you will begin by grabbing your mushrooms and your onions. Of course, we will start by chopping up our aromatics, which is about 3 cloves of garlic. So very simply proceed to chop those very, very roughly. And you can also proceed to chop those a little finer. Once done, we'll proceed to add our garlic to our hot pan, and we'll give that anywhere between a minute to a minute and a half to sweat. And while we do so, we're going to also proceed to have 1 red onion, which we will proceed to also chop quite finely. Proceed to lay the rest of your onion flat on the board, making sure to chop and waste almost none of your onion. And you can proceed to add those to your hot pan as well. And using a wooden spoon, proceed to saute your ingredients together. Once your onion are slightly colored, we're going to proceed to add our sun-dried tomato and pitted olive mixture. Proceed to saute that together. And at this stage, lower your temperature to the lowest possible degree and continue to mix through. Of course, very importantly, remembering to season with some salt, some black peppercorns, and of course, a pinch of your paprika powder. Proceed to mix through. And this should actually be quite a dry mixture at this stage, so please don't be tempted to add any water or any particular oil to this particular dish. Right at the point where your oil is almost completely absorbed and your onions are almost turning translucent, we'll proceed to add our mushrooms. And you can adjust your heat at the moment and raise it a little higher. Now, particularly mushrooms add a nice, beautiful culture to this dish. The beautiful butteriness of them actually complements the eggs. And it also adds a nice, beautiful, rustic flavor to the dish. A combination of the mushrooms and olives, of course, does bring up the beautiful Mediterranean touch of the ingredients. Your pan will start to dry off quite a bit at this stage. So we will proceed to turn our heat off completely. And to this warm mixture, you will incorporate to that some parsley, which of course you will add while the pan is completely turned off from the heat. But the little heat that's still going through should be able to allow for you to combine those flavors very, very gracefully, without, of course, proceeding to cook your ingredients any further. So in goes your parsley, and away goes the stems. Give a nice mix through once more. And once done, you can allow that to cool off very, very briefly on the side. And now next up, we're also going to proceed to crack in about 2 whole medium-sized eggs. Of course, always making sure to not have any shells in there to begin with. Proceed to add a pinch of salt and crush in some black peppercorns. And using a whisk, you can proceed to whip that together. Once your yolks are combined with your whites, we'll proceed to add about half a cup of milk. And as I mentioned in the beginning, very important to always reserve just a little bit more milk for this recipe, just in case you do have a very dry mixture, and you may want to also add a bit of that egg custard mixture. Once that's done and fully combined, we are now going to go into the last and final process, where we're going to be finishing off the ingredients for our strata. So very importantly, begin by taking off the crusts from your bread. And you can reserve those on the side. And all you're going to do now is slice once lengthways, turn to the side, and slice into some 1-inch cubes. So you can also tear the bigger chunks up a little bit. Be sure to run your fingers through the bread just to make sure that your pieces are not stuck together. And once that's ready, we're also going to proceed to add our our marjoram into our egg mixture. And we'll also add a small pinch of our chili flakes. Mix those together. And once mixed through, we will begin by adding our mushroom mixture. Of course, give that anywhere between 4 to 5 minutes to cool off on the side before adding it to your egg. Hence, you will actually be cooking your eggs at that stage. So be sure to allow them quite a bit of time to cool off. And once your mixture is ready, we will begin to prepare our tray, or rather our baking sheet. So to that, proceed to lay over a bit of some aluminium foil. You can also use wax paper for this process. Now we're going to line our dishes very, very lightly with a bit of olive oil. This particularly brings a nice, beautiful flavor. So using your fingers, just proceed to run your finger right around the sides or the walls of your ramekin, and of course do the same at the base. And once completely coated, always a handy tip to always pour out any excess. So just tilt that right over the second bowl, give it a very firm shake, and you can set that on your tray and you can proceed to do the rest. Of course, always working your fingers around the sides allows for you to get a nice even coating, and doing it lastly at the base also allows for you to be able to get most of your surface covered, and of course limit you from wasting or overusing any of your olive oil. So if you have any extra, proceed to just pour that into your egg mixture and set that on your tray likewise. Now very, very simply, divide your batch into two and proceed to fill the bases of your bread, fill the bases of your ramekin with some bread. You'll also proceed to incorporate some of your ham. So just very, very gently chop that very coarsely. And once more, by splitting that into two, proceed to add each half to each of the ramekins. And one particular important thing I've learned over days that I've learned this recipe, very important to give it a firm press before you proceed to add your egg. And this is basically to allow you more room to pour in your egg custard mixture. And it will also allow for your bread to very much soak up all the liquid that goes in there right after filling your cups without actually raising the level too quickly. So a nice firm press at the base. To that we will proceed to add some grated Parmesan cheese. About a tablespoon will do for each. Once done, we will very, very simply remix that egg custard mixture with the mushrooms. Give that a quick shake, and using a ladle, proceed to spoon the mixture into each ramekin. Of course, taking precision not to pour on the sides but only at the center. And very important to mention as well, always have more of the filling and less of the liquid to begin with, just so that you don't fill your cups too quickly. Now we're going to proceed to add our egg mixture now to the base. And this will raise the level of your mixture quite a little bit, but very important to always mention, always avoid filling your cups right to the very top, because you do actually need that bit of space to allow your egg to puff up once it's cooked. And of course, it's also very, very important to mention that once you fill anywhere between 3/4 and a half of the ramekin, always allows for it to puff up very, very easily, and always avoids any chances of you getting a spillover. So this is a very, very particular thing that you could probably add to your recipes if you're taking notes for this recipe. Now, to finish that off, I'm going to begin by slicing very thinly some mozzarella cheese, which I'm just going to place right over the egg. and proceed to do the same for the second piece. Of course, the thinner the slice, the better the evenness and the better the chances of it spreading out once the egg is cooked. But be sure not to fill up too much at the beginning of the cooking process. And of course, always reserve a bit of some Parmesan cheese towards adding that towards the end of the recipe, just to give it a nice, beautiful, cheesy crust. And now we will reheat our oven once more, calibrating our temperature to about 180, between 160 and 180 degrees. And we're going to slide this beautiful mixture in there and allow it to cook undisturbed. So that will be going for about anywhere between 8 to 10 minutes until the egg just starts to puff up, and you'll probably add another 5 minutes just to get a nice beautiful browning. But before we get to that point where I'll show you how to plate and finish this dish, we are going to allow for the fast cooking, and right in between we will interrupt the cooking process, but right after the break, topple up with a bit of some cheese and allow it to cook to the end, and which will of course bring me to the last and final part of the show. But before I explain any further, we will allow you this chance to freshen up, and we'll see you after a very short break. Welcome back, viewers. If you're just tuning in, we're right about at the last and final part of this simple Mediterranean egg strata. Now I'm just going to finish this off very, very simply by adding something that's more complementing to this dish, just to give it a nice, beautiful accompaniment and to give you some beautiful options for your dinner if you're going to be making this yourselves. So to a hot griddle pan, I will add 2 diagonally cut slices of bread, which I will be allowing to toast very, very slowly. And something also to mention for this dish, for those of you who are particularly gentlemen, this may particularly work for you, and it may be a nice, beautiful alternative. But I will mention that it is a very high calorie dish, so if you are going to be having this, you may want to keep away from having it with a starter or a starch particularly, because it will be too filling, particularly for that main dish. But if you are also looking at having some more healthier alternatives to that, you could always cut out the ham, which of course is the meat dish, which is of course the meat in the dish. You can also cut out any particular oils or any particular mixtures, for instance, like the egg base, and you can alternatively use just milk and it will also cook just the same. You can also serve it with a bit of a salad on the side just as it is. It also goes very, very well with some beautifully crisp lettuce. But I am going to be showing you a very simple process of plating it, which we're all alternatively going to go with some nice mixed lettuce, and we're also going to be serving that with some nice crisp toast. So I will begin by tossing those over. And remember, this is just to give it a bit of color and give it a bit of crunch. And now we're also going to be taking this out of the oven very briefly. We'll just give that a few minutes to finish off. And that is our call. Right, so once your toast is done, we'll proceed to just assemble those right over each other to one side of the plate. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, it also is a good alternative if you're looking for a very simple and hearty breakfast. It also works very, very well if you're very lazy on this particular long nights and you're thinking of something that's nice, nutritious, and very easy to make. This would be a very good alternative for you. But before we proceed, let's proceed to take out this from the oven. And as you can be able to see from the cameras, nice, beautiful, even coloring over the top, We did add a bit of some Parmesan cheese towards the last and final part of the cooking process, which of course you can be able to see dotted out in that beautiful brown color. So we're going to move this onto our plate. Of course, be very mindful of burning your hands. Always use something to lift that off. And we're going to just place just one of those on the plate, and we will reserve the rest at the back. And now to just finish off this very simple dish, bit of garnish on your plate always helps. So I'm going to be just dressing that very lightly with a bit of some mustard. Crush over some black peppercorns. Remember, this gives it a nice, beautiful pungency of heat. And we will also add a very, very simple crisp side salad right over the mustard. And the mustard will act pretty much as a dressing, and it also helps when you mix it up together with the lettuce. Gives it a nice, beautiful burst of flavor. So just to finish off your dish, bit of fresh, beautiful lettuce on the side. So to this I added a bit of salt and pepper just to give it a taste. I also dressed it very, very lightly with some olive oil. And now to finish off, I will also be garnishing with a fresh sprig of some basil leaves. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last and final part of this very, very simple Mediterranean egg bake strata. I hope you've managed to learn something handy from the show today, and you will of course be looking forward to be trying it of course on your own. But from my end, I have basically brought you this far. I will also remind you that we do have a Facebook page that you can air your comments, queries, or any questions pertaining the show or the dish before you today. We're always more than happy to hear back from you. But of course, if you have missed out on what we've done in the previous episodes or even in the ones to come, you could always make a point of logging onto our BrandPlus Kenya TV handle, and you'll be able to catch up on more of what we've done in the previous days, and you can also be able to catch up on what you missed out today. But for this, I will be bidding you farewell, wishing you a lovely evening, and until the next episode, God bless and see you soon.